Uh, Good afternoon and welcome to this event that is called Circular Agriculture and Sanitation. It has its origins in a paper that was co-written by the UN FAO and the Toilet Board Coalition that is called Future-Proofing Agricultural Systems. And I would recommend that too. You can access it through the FAO site or the Toilet Board site. We have opening remarks from Sasha Kuoshima of the FAO, and then a panel who will talk from different perspectives about this whole idea of circular agriculture and sanitation. An idea that actually supports the theme of Toilet Day, which is valuing toilets. So without further ado, I will ask Sasha to make some opening remarks. Over to you, Sasha.
Thank you, Neil. Ladies and gentlemen and distinguished participants, good greetings, everyone. I'm Sasha Kuoshima. I'm the Deputy Director of Land and Water Division at the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, or FAO. And it's a great pleasure for me to be with you to celebrate the World Toilet Day with our partner, the Toilet Board Coalition, and the many organizations represented in our panel today. So water sanitation needs to be brought to the forefront of building resilient and sustainable food systems. Today, agriculture is the largest water user worldwide, and we use about 70% of the fresh water withdrawals globally. And water scarcity is a growing concern in many parts of the world. According to FAO's State of Food and Agriculture Report 2020, 3.2 billion people live in agricultural areas with high water shortages or water scarcity. Out of those 1.2 billion people, that's about 1/6 of the world's population, live in severely water-constrained agriculture areas. And this poses serious implications for food security and water security. Global estimates show that we need to produce 50% more food by 2050 in order to feed the growing population. This increased demand, together with the demand from other competing uses of water, will place unprecedented pressure on water and many agricultural production systems across the world. These challenges also have been exacerbated by climate change, which has led to drought and less predictable water access for agriculture and food production, especially in the water-scarce world that I just mentioned. So the use of reclaimed wastewater, or the circular agriculture, is an option that is increasingly being recognized in regions facing water scarcity, growing urban populations, and growing demand for irrigation water. Properly managed wastewater should be viewed as a valuable resource and a solution to multitudes of problems. For one, it can be a source of irrigation water, and the nutrients in it can be used for crop production. And it will reduce the need for abstracting high-value fresh water and also reduce the reliance on expensive synthetic fertilizers. The wastewater sludge, or we call it the biosolid from wastewater treatment systems, have been used to manufacture construction materials and generate biogas and biofuel. Reclaimed wastewater can act as a buffer against drought and climate change, and the methane that's captured from wastewater treatment systems can be used for generating energy and help in mitigating greenhouse gas emissions. By reducing also the synthetic nitrogen fertilizer inputs into agriculture fields, the reused organic fertilizer can help in reducing carbon and nitrogen emissions in the environment and bring back soil organic matter that is needed to keep healthy soils, since 30% of the global soils are degraded. So this is a very important contribution. Hence, wastewater can generate income for resource-poor farmers and people. This economic system focuses on maximizing reuse of resources and products and minimizing their depreciation and degradation, which Neil had mentioned, the circular economy. This has been promoted by FAO, the European Union in the Farm to Fork approach, in the Green Deal, and many other countries for many years, and is now a recognized solution. The agriculture sector offers significant opportunities. for turning unsustainable production into economically efficient models of water and nutrient cycling and reuse. Improving efficient use of resources is a top priority that needs to be powered by new knowledge, technology, innovation, and finance at scale. FAO has experience in a wide array of agricultural development projects involving wastewater reuse, water quality, and resource planning, since we also developed the 2006 WHO FAO UNEP guidelines for the safe use of wastewater excreta and greywater. We will be reviewing these guidelines and renewing them through a fit-for-purpose reuse in our new program for the next biennium. In the past, we also have supported various FAO member countries where farmers engaged in urban and peri-urban agriculture can better manage waste and wastewater efficiently and effectively while meeting health objectives and food been developed on treatment, reclaimed water, reuse, and biogas capture, with main objective in improving efficiency of water use for crop production through proper treatment of sewage effluent for irrigation. Substantial training, including farmer field schools, technical assistance in participating countries, demonstration sites, and equipment for quality testing and monitoring have also resulted. We have recently launched with the Tolabor Coalition this new report on future-proofing agriculture systems to shine a light on the local and national context in championing circular sanitation economies and products coming from them. Building up on these initiatives and expertise in land, water, and soil solutions, the FAO's Land and Water Division has launched a comprehensive program called One Water, One Health. This is an approach to ensure availability of water and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all that will be combined with the circular economy principle to net zero food systems towards a thriving rural economy. We aim to create healthier ecosystems and improve soil health and water quality by identifying, fostering, and promoting technical innovations in pathogen surveillance and risk mitigation and management. We must also focus our attention on the rural poor, who represent the bulk of 800 million people still suffering from hunger and access to safe and clean water. Women and youth constitute a large share of the people living in rural areas, and they are often the most disadvantaged and have less access to productive resources. So here we need to accelerate two-pronged actions. First, to secure access to water, sanitation, and resources, especially for poor family farmers, women, and youth who collectively conduct agriculture in the rural areas and feed much of the world. And second, we must promote ways for agriculture to produce more efficiently using resources wisely. This calls for sustainable water and resource management in agriculture and increased investments. These actions, when coupled with better access to social protection, can enhance the economic and productive capacity of smallholder farmers. Jointly with our partners, we can identify business models for the circular sanitation economy and improve the urban-rural connections to create healthier environments conducive for better human and environmental health. The recycling of wastewater is a key link in integrated water resources management that can fulfill several different but interrelated objectives. These are expressed as win-win propositions, delivering simultaneous benefits to farmers, cities, and nature, and are solutions to the urgent global problems of food, clean water, the safe disposal of waste, and the protection of vital aquatic ecosystems. So let me now welcome the panel of experts and conclude by saying that FAO is committed to work together with all of you in accelerating the SDG, the Sustainable Development Goal 6, in achieving clean water and sanitation with concrete on-the-ground actions. Thank you, and back to you, Neil.
Thanks very much, Sasha. And I know your time is tight today and that you would have to leave us. So thank you very much for spending time with us and giving those very comprehensive opening remarks. As Sasha has said, we're now going to move to a panel of experts who are going to talk to you about this thinking of circular economy from various aspects, agriculture, private sector, technology, and the public sector, the government sector. So the first speaker, and these presentations will be short with some discussion thereafter, all looking to deal and respond to this question of increasing resilience and sustainability, particularly for farmers, and recognizing the nexus thinking and the circular economy thinking that we've already spoken about. So USAID is going to address us first. There I see his face on the screen, who has an agricultural perspective. So over to you, Moffat. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil, and welcome to our participants and welcome to the co-panelists. I will basically add to the frame on sustainable agriculture, thinking about circular thinking and how we build resilience and food security. I want to maybe already present ideas we have regarding multiple use systems so that we can get to green production and really improve efficiencies. To set the stage, I want to take us back to the infancy of human society development, where we kind of had a very circular existence, basically. Hunter-gatherer communities, very basic, but also very challenging, as you can imagine, a lot of vagaries of food insecurity. And this actually propelled what became the agrarian revolution 10,000 years ago. And through the agrarian revolution, we have had sort of farming and civilizations that come up over the millennia, up until we actually achieved industrialization about 300 years ago. And industrialization actually also led us to additional new problems, including sanitation problems, as people became more urbanized and so on. And so we were sort of removed from nature. We were getting more and more into cities. And with industrialization also came a lot of food security problems. And part of what we saw was a little bit of a specialization in terms of our human endeavors. We came to a lot of linear thinking, and it actually a lot of reductionist science that actually helped discover many things, including how to produce food more efficiently and so on. We tended to have these singular goals and basically almost like a continuous growth agenda that we've seen over the last couple hundred years, and culminating actually with a green revolution, where we saw major productivity gains in terms of what we can get per hectare, especially with our staples. But the green revolution also resulted in our having a lot of challenges, both for the environment, for social issues, for equity, and again, in both rural and urban settings, these have always been problems. Now, all this is now complicated further by what we are seeing these days in terms of climate change, precipitated by our industrial revolution, a lot of our use of fossil fuels, loading up the atmosphere with a lot of carbon. And all these are problems that are putting the pressure additionally to everything that we have to address as a society. Now, in comes the Sustainable Development Goals. And today, of course, we are primarily discussing Sustainable Goal number 6 on sanitation and water and hygiene, but also the linkages it has with agriculture, Sustainable Development Goal number 2. And that's actually the area that I mostly operate. I work at USAID in our Resilience and Food Security Bureau. This is the bureau that also houses our water and sanitation activities. And we do have a major government effort known as Feed the Future that actually looks at increasing productivity, agriculture-led economic growth, improving resilience, and improving nutrition. We will not achieve these things without thinking about sanitation. And one of the tools, one of the approaches that we have to look at is basically what comes as a circular kind of an agriculture, a circular kind of an economy. So again, we need to divert, to evolve from linear thinking and really stop having these singular purposes and silos, and really think about systems. How are we going to do this? There are several ideas that have, of course, come up. And one of the things that we actually implement in our Feed the Future activities, supported by the US government, is work relating to sustainable intensification of agriculture. In other words, we are really aiming for a green revolution, where we will actually look at the environmental impact, we will look at the equity impact, human dimension, social impact, and certainly productivity and economic, because we really do have to achieve all these objectives jointly. I only have 5 minutes for this initial setup, but the key thing that I want to emphasize is that we have an opportunity with sustainable agriculture and circular thinking to really link the water cycle, nutrient cycle, whether we're talking nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur, potassium, any of the 16 elements that all the plants need to grow. How can we repurpose, reuse a lot of those elements in terms of our linkages with the kinds of multiple use systems we can set up as we think about achieving both food security and better nutrition for everyone. So I'll stop there and actually maybe present the final revolution maybe I want to talk about, which is basically what we are facing with the information revolution, information technology revolution. The challenge that we face right now, and we do have a lot of ideas about solutions, is how are we going to hack a system so that we are really approaching our problems with an integrated thinking and an integrated framing. That is the issue. And I look forward to having additional discussions and question and answers. Over.
Thanks very much, Buffett. Very comprehensive as well and interesting. While you were talking, I don't know if any of the other panel have a question for you, but my thought was, in your talking about phosphorus and nitrogen and all the rest of it, I see the phosphorus price has almost doubled in the last 4 months. And I wondered what that's going to do for agriculture, especially when all of the food that we eat contains phosphorus, which then goes, most of it, into the bottom of the ocean, because only 10% of the world's sewage is treated. So what are you as an agricultural expert going to do when all the phosphorus is in the bottom of the sea and the mines have run out in terms of circular thinking?
Yes, this is a big question because, again, majority of what has driven productivity gains over the last couple of centuries are innovations relating to capture of nitrogen, for instance. But on phosphorus, for sure, a lot of it has kind of been locked. A lot of it coming from North Africa, for instance. And there's been a lot of loading in basically the global north, where they're using a lot of fertilizers and so on. And we kind of need to see on the other side in the tropics across Africa, in South Asia, in sections of Central America, where we actually have deficiencies. So we actually need to think about where is this phosphorus going to come from? And we cannot get healthy people, we cannot get healthy plants or ecosystems or animals without phosphorus. Phosphorus is part of DNA, literally. And we need this in our food, we need this in our systems. And one of the ways is really thinking about how we capture phosphorus and other nutrients coming from the effluent in our from sewage, for instance, or in otherwise thinking more creatively about recycling this so that it's not going to the bottom of the ocean.
Thank you. Well, hopefully Ryan, when he gets his chance to talk later, we'll talk about his technology and how he's going to help the world recover all the phosphorus. So if we can move on for now, and we can have more time for questions at the end. Our next speaker is Joanne Carey, who is from Synergy in Kenya, a company that I know very well, that has done amazing things in innovating at the small scale or smallish scale in terms of private sector service provision. So she's going to talk to us about the issues that she faces as a private sector service provider and what she thinks can be done to support this whole question of sustainability. So Joanne, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil, for that introduction. It's really great to see everyone here. I'm going to be speaking about the policy environment on a global scale. I would like to start with what is working. And I believe what's working at the moment is that there's a realization that we need to move from the linear approach to waste management to a circular approach. And there's that there's more cognizance on the need the need to actually continue using a circular economy approach. However, there are a couple of challenges that come with using the circular economy approach and the regulation around it. One of the things is a lot of the sanitation policies that have been created globally usually focus a lot on the public health aspect as well as the environmental health aspect, but with little focus on how the reuse work can be done. And for instance, there's, a regulation in the EU, for instance, on the fact that sanitation, inorganic fertilizer sanitation waste cannot be part of that. That's a great challenge. There's also one other challenge where there is actually need to move regulation, government engagement from government knowing what private sector is doing to actual support. And support is shown through financial support. And this can be in the form of PPPs or other forms of financial support, because it's something that private sector has actually taken up. One of the other bigger challenges is that even though there's some regulation on sanitation reuse, you find that these regulations are really prescriptive as opposed to, really answering the question of the sanitation value chain. And this is a challenge because you find that there are a lot of private sector initiatives that come and are very innovative, and the regulation cannot keep up with the innovation. So that's some of the biggest challenges that we face. What do you think the way forward would be? Definitely one of the issues that can be addressed is regulation should be prescriptive of ideally what would you like the sanitation system to be like, and leave it open for people to actually innovate sanitation reuse. And that allows for private sector to actually move in and move faster. The other one should be, the export standards need to be revised on the standards of sanitation. I understand it comes from a culture perspective where sanitation waste should not be touched, so to speak, but regulation should be more open and open up to many people using sanitation waste in the agricultural way. Definitely one of the other solutions and what the other way forward should be when it comes to government engagement. There needs to be a more robust way in which the government actually engages private sector, over and above having incentivizing policies, but actually having financial mechanisms through which governments could support private sector. And one of them actually could be, for example, having a framework of, for instance, public-private partnerships that are focused, that are specific to circular economy. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Joanne. And I'm sure that our last speaker from AMCAR will have something to say about the government and regulation. You touched on product safety and satisfying people that the circular economy produces safe products. I was interested to know what kind of experience you've had with that in Kenya.
That's an interesting question. Thank you for that. You find that, for instance, we have tried to export organic fertilizer to the EU and the US countries, and you find that we are not able to export fertilizer that has a sanitation waste. And so as an alternative, we've actually converted organic waste, the market waste, to organic fertilizer to actually keep these standards. I think one thing that could actually be thought about is deregulating. If, for instance, our local standards bureau has actually given us a thumbs up on the organic waste, then internationally that this should also be picked up as well.
Thanks. I don't see any of the other panel raising their hands yet. Maybe you're waiting for the end to have a robust discussion. Let's move on, and then we'll open the floor at the end for any other remarks. The next speaker, as I mentioned earlier, is Orion Herman, who is from Liquid Gold, and he's going to give us a technology perspective on his very interesting product solutions. So over to you. You're on mute.
Sorry, apologize. Sorry, apologize. Thank you, Neil. I really appreciate it. Yeah, just a quick introduction. Name's Orion Herman, CEO and founder of a company called Liquid Gold. And as the name suggests, we do focus on the circular economy of sanitation, specifically around the urine. And the reason why we chose urine is because of its composition of nitrogen, phosphorus, and ammonia. And as you so likely mentioned before, is globally phosphate is running out. And the way we do it traditionally is not sustainable because we mine it out. It's an expensive and intensive, energy-intensive process. And it's depleting at a rapid rate. And as you mentioned before, Neil, it's a finite resource. And unfortunately, you just cannot replicate it. But the human body produces it naturally. So why not be able to harness the potential of this nutrients and be able to close the loop between sanitation and agriculture sustainably? So we have developed a process in terms of the technology of being able to harness this resource by upfront technology and decentralized systems. We've gone through a rigorous process of being able to optimize your input versus output ratios, making sure that we go through the certification and meeting standards so that we are able to add into the narrative of, in the fertilizer industry. If you look at the African context, we import extensive fertilizer globally, and there's a massive opportunity because as Africa as a whole, we suffer quite intensely with the sanitation. So if we can flip this chart around by being able to offer solutions that recover valuable nutrients that meet regulation standards and feed into the supply chain for food security. As population grows, demand on food is going to increase. So we're forced to look for alternative solutions. So we are, as a solution provider, from a technology provider, we made sure that we meet the standards. We tick all the bells and whistles and make sure there's no harmful or nasty elements that could damage soil as well as plant. And going through this process with partners is a critical point of getting to your mass and to your scale. Because as long as you've got quality standards, you can prove this to industry and partners, and then you'll be able to start supplying this into the chain. But as well, we also don't want extensive capital layout for sanitation projects and treatment facilities. So we took a design approach of making it cost-effective, off-the-grid solutions that can be on-site treatment as well as off-site treatment, but at a low cost, so that you can ramp up and scale up quite quickly. So we believe that not only are we able to cover the nutrients, but urine is 96% water. And as we know, water is going to become the next biggest risk for any industry globally. And one of the biggest consumers is agriculture. So not only are we then able to pull out the nutrients, but being able to provide safe, non-potable water into that supply chain as well unlocks two value chains, water association and nutrient association. But also being able to get nutrients from your local scale, then you're able to have sustainable farming as well. That doesn't impact the soil, that doesn't have a lot of runoff, that is slow release and it's root activated. It has a lot of contribution towards the local economy by creating jobs. So there's a lot of value add by being able to close the loop within the sanitation, but also recover the water so that it's in a closed loop system. So we've been able to focus on that. What we've learned, though, is in terms of the industry and in terms of being live in the environment, is that having human resources look after the facilities and look after your technology becomes such a key element, because there's no silver bullet when it comes to sanitation, but involving communities, involving the different stakeholders within the projects, we lead to a higher success rate. And collaborating, because sanitation, we tend to build things on island and try to. But if you collaborate more often with different partners that have issues and you're able to solve those issues, you're able to scale up and move a lot faster. So, so sanitation, being able to add value into the narrative of sanitation, I think we're getting closer and closer and more acceptable that byproducts from this precious resource can become, marketably accepted. Thank you.
That was very efficient. Does anybody have any questions for Orion? No? Oh, there we go. Mafat, I saw your hand.
Yeah, just a quick one. in terms of Orion, and I guess others on the panel, maybe for additional discussion, is overcoming the bias that people have against any kind of toilet output going back into our food system, because people have beliefs, they have practices, cultures, and so on, and how to think about that. Maybe not for too much exposition now, but for later discussion, how we really overcome that. Over.
Do you want to respond now, Aaron?
Yeah, absolutely. So taking cultural perspective, or taking cultural understanding and cultural belief systems into perspective is very, very important. And in ensuring your process and the way you go about treating and recovering nutrients is vitally important. And exposing and opening up that sort of narrative and how you go about processing becomes key, because we know fundamentally, adding or recovering nutrients and using it back for soil, some cultures go up against it. But if you have a sound technological approach to it, it becomes a lot more easier to approach it, because once you start, like for example, we use a biological chemical reactionary process of precipitation with struvite. When people understand the process that we use, becomes a lot easier when people see a dry fertilizer product versus direct application of urine being applied to the soil. It's a lot easier conversation to have. So we found that sort of worked a lot better. And again, as mentioned, making sure that you have standards and certifications by your authoritative bodies in the agriculture space also becomes builds up confidence within the market.
So where's your bottle of struvite phosphorus? Because I challenge anybody to see the difference between that phosphorus and what comes out of the ground.
Wonder if you can see that.
Yeah, you can see it clearly. Nice white powder. So
absolutely, yeah.
And it's perfectly safe. Okay.
100%. And the thing is, like, generally I get people to spell it, because the notion is, or the perspective is, it's going to smell like urine, and
yes.
it actually just smells like a bone meal of fertilizer. So, which is quite great.
Right. And Joanne's nodding her head. She's got her hand up. Joanne, you wanted? Well, you've done the same thing, but talk.
We've also experienced a similar challenge in terms of the different cultures. Even within our country, there are different cultures that are very anti-use of solid waste. One of the things that we do is just explain the process, as has been mentioned by Ryan. But second, I think ensuring that people understand that the product is standardized, it's certified. And that gives people comfort that this can actually be used. Second thing is that when you explain the value that will come out from using the organic fertilizer, for instance, there's an assured 30% increase in yield. And when people actually see this and see evidence of this, and there's more confidence in the product that we actually sell.
Yeah. Exactly. The cabbages that we grew in their stuff are always double the size of the normal cabbages. But let's move on to our last speaker, but by no means least, who is Kitch Bauer from AMCAR. And he sits, is going to bring a public sector perspective. That will close the loop of all four aspects of this value chain. So over to you for your contribution. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Neil, and to all the speakers that have run before me. And I hope that I will be able to really close the loop on the discussions that we've had, like Neil said. And first of all, I think it's very important to have a strong enabling environment that actually creates a very level playing field and levels the playing field for private sector entrepreneurs like Synergy and Sanitation and Liquid to be able to based on the principles of the circular economy and that have been used. But then I want to start from a point of view of at the continental level, where our ministers actually saw the need to promote and encourage reuse of to promote the circular economy, actually, of urine and feces. So in the governments that we had that succeeded, the Queenie commitments of Neil and and other sector professionals that laid the foundation for us to build on. Commitment 7 actually for sanitation products. So and incidentally,
Kitch, hang on. Can you turn off your video because it's breaking up your talking?
Commitment as the second report just came up. Okay, can you hear me better now?
Yeah, it's much better. Thank you.
Okay, cool. So I was saying that the seventh commitment, which promotes reuse and recycling of feces and urine, actually is the least performing commitment of the 10 that we have in the Africa San Go commitment. Now, I use that example to underscore that even at the ministerial level, there is that level of understanding and prioritization. But then we know that every action is local. So action needs to take place at national level. But then and there needs to be that enabling environment that has to be facilitated at national level by government. And as I used to say, government is the biggest business. It's the biggest business. If you get their buy-in, then every other business will be involved. And so one of the key building blocks of the enabling environment is the sanitation policy. And I wanted to tie this to what Joanne talked about, and of course, even Ngugi. The ASPG, which AMCA has developed, which Kenya is the first to adopt to develop its sanitation management policy, has elaborately captured issues that will promote an enabling environment for businesses like Synergy and Sanitation to thrive and be impactful. And because we've dealt effectively with the issue of private sector engagement, we've dealt effectively with the issue of regulation of both on-site and seaward sanitation, and even institutional arrangements for effective governance of sanitation. And now, for all of this to happen, I always say that the other elements of the enabling environment that people miss out when we're having discussions on governance of sanitation are both at the top and below. When you list all the other ones, one is a high-level political buy-in, which can be exemplified and shown by Cecilia Kariuki, for instance, and stakeholder engagement and involvement. So I have this illustration of that I experienced that I was in Naivasha, and we went out for some nyama choma, and I was sitting, it was quite cold, and I was sitting by the fireside, and all the coal briquettes were from pieces. And it was my first experience. I was sitting there, the fire was burning, they were burning very well, and there was no smoke, and it was amazing for me to see that they burn even better than firewood and charcoal from firewood. And imagine if it was Cecily Kariuki experiencing that, having that kind of experience, and that is shown around Kenya, how people will react, to know that it is harmless, it is even much more useful than, you get more utility out of it than even firewood and charcoal. So it's that kind of awareness creation that we need to engage in. And then if we find a way for government to give incentive to small and medium enterprises in this circular economy business, we'll be on our way to ending the sanitation crisis, because therein I see the potential for ending open defecation and ending even indiscriminate disposal of pieces. Thank you.
Thanks very much. As a person that spent most of my life in the public sector, I appreciate what you said about the need for the public sector to be a supportive player. It's so important. And I think whether it's Orion making his product, or Joanne trying to run her business, or Moffat trying to convince government to allow crops to be grown using the circular economy, the public sector keeps having a role to play, which in a way speaks to me about how effectively we are communicating as a sector to governments, not just through AMCAR, but internationally, because it's one thing to have Africa saying yes, but we need the European Union and the other big players to also say yes, because I know what happens if the EU says something safe. If you use this process, everybody lines up. They tend to be less convinced when South Africa or Nigeria or Kenya says it's safe. And it's just the way the world is, unfortunately. Anybody want to add in anything before we get to the closing remarks? Any other comments? Anything you think we've left out that needs to be raised? I think we've done justice to the topic. Right. Shall we do ladies first? Joanne, you go, and then Moffat.
Thank you for that. I think one thing just to add, I really like what Kitch has said. We need to have really high level commitment. For instance, we have a very high level commitment from the minister, but I think what will just take this a step further is, like, for instance, what India did, having sanitation as a commitment by the presidency. And you find that from there, things move much faster as they would have, as opposed to just to having a ministerial commitment. I think for me, that's one of the biggest things that we could do.
In fact, that's interesting. Do you know that in India, when I was there last, I was given a banknote, and on it had this Swachh Bharat, which is their symbol for sanitation for everybody. It's actually on their banknotes, a promotion of sanitation for all. I don't know how many other countries have a sanitation comment on their banknotes, but yeah. Sorry, Moffat, butted in before you had a chance to talk. Over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. I kind of wanted to re-emphasize, really, and I think appreciate all the comments from the rest of the co-panelists here in terms of integrated thinking and approaches, and how we will innovate to, again, nudge our private sector, civil society, governments, the public sector, I mean, all members of societies at all levels, to really be thinking about systems. And again, there's an efficiency that people see in thinking linearly and in the tunnel vision of whatever sector or whatever issue you look at. But it always takes more to zoom out and see the bigger picture, see the pieces, how they interact, and so on. So I want to re-emphasize, between our Sustainable Development Goal number 2 on food and nutrition and the Sustainable Development Goal on sanitation number 6, we really need to have more innovation and more thinking about how exactly we will effect that. There's a big discussion that has happened with multiple use systems, where if you're approaching irrigation, for instance, oftentimes communities and households use water in multiple ways. And typically, when you're talking to a Ministry of Agriculture, or a Ministry of Water or Ministry of Irrigation, they say, oh, we are not sanitation experts, or we are not health experts. So we are only concerned about the quality of the water for irrigation, and that's it. But we know that many communities actually want to use the same water to do household chores, to do agriculture, for their livestock, for commercial manufacturing, little, cottage industry type things. So how do we enable communities and governments really to have policies that can support that kind of multiple use system thinking? And again, the innovations on that are much needed from both public and private sector. Over.
I just saw your hand. You want to come back? And I see people are also commenting on the chat. Interesting. Kitch, over to you.
Yes, I just want to just re-echo what Joanne said about that high-level presidential, mobilization, or it's infectious. It does miracles. But as we can see, the president of my country, President Buhari, has made that same pronouncement, and he has launched several things. But then there's a lot more lessons to be learned from India to get that off the ground. As AMCAO, we will, and working with the African Union, we are continuing with that advocacy to get that highest level of buy-in. And I have personally discussed with several presidents, and they are working on that. But what follows thereafter is equally as important. And just to also say that we are going to have another Heads of State Summit, which actually endorsed your Etiquette Neil, which actually took us to where we are today in terms of sanitation across the continent. So we're going to have a Heads of State Summit in Dakar, the second Heads of State Summit on water and sanitation. And we look forward to putting sanitation and even hygiene high on the agenda. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Right, I think we've come to the end of our time. So it's just for me to close. Ariane, I saw the chat comment was also about somebody else developing technology. And I think that area is one of the areas where we still need to grow. There are not many companies that are as advanced as you. I know Gates and the others are doing a lot of research, but there is still a technology gap that will help make this idea of a circular economy and sanitation more of a reality. So what I've taken from this very interesting 45, 50 minutes, it started with the fact that we mustn't forget the poor. That it's easy to provide services to the wealthy, but it's the poor that have the greatest need and are the least served of everybody. So we need solutions that are affordable and usable and acceptable to poor people, preferably the same service as the richer people get. The other thing that all of you have mentioned is the need to see sanitation as a resource, whether it's for agriculture or water, to drink or whatever. And the fact that it is a source of water and nutrients and biomass. And not to see it as this dangerous thing that we must get away from us and into the bottom of the ocean as fast as possible. The next thing is, a lot of you talked about product safety. And I guess that ties up with Kitch's comments at the end about the enabling environment, and echoed by Joanne, the importance of the public sector and its policies and its regulation, and the need for them to lead and to be convinced and to put their hands in their pockets when it's needed, especially when it comes to providing services to the poor. And then the last big takeaway for me was, well, second last, going to scale, whether it's through agriculture or in this process of the circular economy. It's not a 1-minute job. There's a lot to be done still. There's a lot of convincing needed. There's a lot of green shoots out there, but all of us collectively need to put our hand to the wheel to make this concept a reality. We're talking about the future of the world and the sustainability of the world. And I think this is not something that we should just ignore. And in doing that, we need to take our communities along with us, whether that's the government part of community or the trade union part or the man in the street or the woman in the street. We need to be able to communicate effectively what we're on about, what products are out there, what new ideas are out there, that this product that we produce is safe, that it's usable, that it's important, and that it has the support of governments and regulators and everybody. So thank you all for your time and for speaking and making it, for me, very interesting. And to hear the introductory and then 4 totally different perspectives, all of you kind of converging into the same kinds of things. But none of you are saying to me, there's no hope. You're all saying, we're going to solve this thing. We know what we need to do. What we've now got to do is get out there and make it happen. So thank you very much. And thank you to the audience for listening. And I wish you well. Goodbye to you.